Welcome back to the Main Street TV Local Sports Break. Hi, I'm your host, Ralph Miranda. Well, another week under the belt for the Maryville Rebels, a big 52-6 win over the Knoxville Central Bobcats at home last Friday night. The Rebels now 2-0. They will play their first region game coming up this coming Friday against Bradley Central. Coach Derek Hunt's going to join us. We're going to talk a little bit about the Central game. A good performance by Maryville on both sides of the football. Big defensive plays, interception return for a touchdown. Couple of touchdown passes by the offense. So the Maryville team kind of hitting their stride here in 2 weeks at 2-0. We'll also talk a little bit about the position groups. You know, obviously the big injury to their number one running back last week against Heritage had some other guys have to step up. We'll talk about that group, talk about their defense, their offensive line, which guys are starting to step up, which groups are looking better as we get into the season. Then we'll wrap it up by talking about the upcoming region game at Bradley Central. You know, this will be a big game for Maryville on the road against a team that's very good this year and has been good the last couple of seasons. They've got some really good football players, one of them committed to the University of Tennessee, and I'm sure the Rebels will have to be in top form against Bradley Central. So all that and more coming up on the Main Street TV Local Sports Break. We'll be right back. Okay, welcome back to the Main Street Local TV, Local Sports Break, We're joined now by the head football coach of the Maryville Rebels, Coach Derek Hunt. And Derek, big win last Friday night, home opener against Knox Central. I know the crowd was probably excited. I love to watch those early games because they start in the daylight and then end in the night. And then, of course, as the season goes on, they'll start in the dark. But before we get started, tell me a little bit about the atmosphere. You know, I know everybody was excited about this season getting started, and I know you guys were glad to be at home.
Yeah, it was a great night for our community. I was anxious to see what the crowd looked like with the heat that we had. I mean,
right.
High of 95 on Friday. It was about 90 at kickoff, but we got to the mid 80s, you know, throughout the game and then lower. But, man, it turned out to be a great crowd. And, you know, at 17-0 at halftime. And so crowd stuck around second half, which is always cool as well.
Are they still, you talked about the heat. I remember years ago, they used to have certain protocols in place. Are they still doing that, the referees? Like if it gets to a certain temperature at game time, are they still taking breaks and that sort of thing?
Yes, sir. They still have. It's probably more strict now, you know, than it was 10 years ago. It has to be. So we took a break you know, somewhere around the 7-8 minute mark. Anytime there was a dead, you know, a clean break, they took about an extra, honestly, 3 to 4 or 5 minutes, you know, to get water for everybody. And then every time there was a turnover or a score, they would take an extended break as well. So, and that was just in the first half. And once we got to the second half, we just played a normal game.
Right. Obviously, the sun went down and got a little cooler. All right, let's talk a little bit about the game. You know, obviously going into it, Knox Central coming off a big win over Fulton, a team that, you know, Fulton usually fields a pretty competitive football team. I know they've been a little bit down, but Knox Central, you know, we talked last week about them being very athletic. They run, like most teams do, a lot of spread, but I did notice that they set up in the I formation a lot. They like to pound the ball. So tell me a little bit about how the game started out. You said it was 17-0. What are some of the keys that you think went into such a big final score?
Well, we were a little sloppy on the offensive side of the ball in the first half. We had a holding call that set us back 1st and 20.
Right.
And then we had a peel back block, you know, and a defenseless player block on a quarterback rolled left and reverse fields. Anytime you reverse fields, you know,
right,
you know, that's going to happen.
Right.
At every level of the game, the peel back block happens, and if they're not looking, and you lead with anything but hands, even if they're not looking, it's a penalty now. So that happened on the first drive, which we were able to convert anyway. So defense played great, I thought, first half, and you know, got after that running back a little bit, and we kind of bent a little bit, but didn't break. You know, I don't think they got it in the red zone, you know, until second half. which was awesome to see defense kind of flying around. So offensively, we weren't as clean as I would have liked to have been in the first half. And in the second half, I think we scored 35 points. So we did it off a defensive touchdown. We had a big play, through the air, 50-yard touchdown pass, and then had a couple drives where we just moved the ball, efficiently and effectively down the field. So, overall, real pleased with the win. It was definitely a team effort. But, when you watch the tape, anybody knows if you've been coaching or you've been around high school football a long time, you know that the road's about to get a lot tougher. And our region, probably more so than any other year, is up for grabs with all the talent that some of these other teams in our region have got. So, we got to play a lot better if we want to compete in our region.
Yeah, I remember going back to the crackback. In my days, Derek, you could crack back a guy below the knees when he wasn't looking. So it was a lot more challenging back then than it is today, right?
Absolutely, you do whatever you wanted to back in the day.
You talked about the region being so competitive this year, and it's about to get tougher, which it always does.
Yeah.
As a coach, and this is going to kind of be a little bit of maybe of a strange question, but I don't intend it to be. You've had two really big wins, coming out of the gate here. Big scores, big wins. As a coach, knowing what you got ahead of you, would you have rather it be maybe a little bit tighter, or do you think by winning such a big score, maybe the kids get a little complacent, or is that kind of you guys' job to make sure they understand that, hey, it's not going to be this easy going forward?
Yeah, I think it's a double-edged sword, to be honest, because you want your kids to be playing with confidence,
right,
and playing fast and feeling good about what we're able to do, because belief is one of the number one things. You got to get your kids to believe.
Right.
And so if we hadn't maybe have played as well as we did in some areas, maybe they're not feeling as confident going into a really big region game on the road. It's going to be a huge test this week.
Yes.
But on the flip side, it's like if you're playing in really tough games and they're close,
right.
They're not believing, they're not feeling great about themselves. You also don't want them to get complacent. It's definitely the job of the coach to make sure that we're at our best. I think our kids understand that this week's going to look a little bit different, but then, also it's not like we had a running clock in the first half of either game.
Right.
So we made just enough plays in the first half, the first two games, to have a comfortable lead at halftime, but we didn't just run off and leave them. And so that's what's the message that's got to be clear to our kids today is, and they understand we've got a long way to go. That's the first thing I told them Friday night after the game. Enjoy this one, but we're not close.
Tell me a little bit about Central. Did they do anything that you guys were not prepared for, or did they pretty much stick to the script that you guys knew they would do?
Yeah, they looked very similar to what they did against Fulton. I think, early on in the year, I think they're kind of like us, trying to figure out who they are.
Right.
And so what they had success with against Fulton was kind of the same thing they tried against us, which makes sense. If it worked the first game,
sure,
maybe your good is just better than our good, and you got to find that out. And so you'd hate to change and not know, what would have happened if you'd have just stuck with what you thought you were good at. So they had some really good players. I think they got fatigued very quickly,
right,
in the heat, and a little less depth than us probably. So Coach Craney is a phenomenal football coach. He was the defense coordinator on those two state championship teams. I mean, he knows the game really, really well. So anyway, just they looked very similar, just couldn't quite execute.
On the flip side of my previous question too about the scores, I'm assuming you were able to get a lot of young guys in each game, right? So that they got some experience going forward.
Yeah, that's always a goal of ours, to get to play our young guys under the lights. The one of the main issues is the running clock. I despise the running clock.
I agree.
And it got moved from 35 down to 30 this year.
Ooh.
So, it used to be, you could get to 35 and then it would run, or, sometimes we'd miss a lot of times. I can remember we would not convert an extra point and it would be 34.
Right.
And anytime we get, in the past, we've been fortunate enough to have games where we've been up, and,
right.
And so we would always sub our kids when we get up 4 or 5 scores in the second half. we're not trying to push the thing to 70 points before we sub.
Right.
And that's what's happened is you've had teams abuse that opportunity of running up the score on some folks. And so that's what's got this running clock thing going, which I'm okay with the running clock. In my opinion, it should be 38, because if a team who's going to do it the right way,
right,
will get to, let's say 42-7, if they can get up 42-7, by 3 quarters, the fourth quarter, they're going to play all young kids and the score's not going to change, or the other team may score,
right.
Which is what you want, and you're still not running the clock if it's at 38, but if it's at 30 or 35, but definitely 30 is even worse. But now, at 28-0, we're not subbing out, because
no.
4 scores, if you've got a half to play, especially against somebody who, if they have a good quarterback and throw it behind you, and they get an onside kick, and now it's it could be a 2-score game like that. Right. And with momentum on the wrong side, we've seen state championship games. Farragut came back from 28 to win the game. So in the state championship game, this was probably 5-6 years ago.
Right.
You've just seen too many comebacks. So at 28 points, I don't think most teams are going to feel comfortable enough to sub, let alone at 30.
Right.
So I just don't understand the whole concept behind that. I am not a fan. Unfortunately, there has been teams who have abused that, and that's why it's there.
Yeah, well, I think they go about, the rule kind of doesn't attack the real problem, and I think the real problem is that you have too many teams out there, Maryville not being one of them, obviously, but teams that can sub but don't sub. You know what I mean? They're playing their starters into the fourth quarter when they're ahead by 35 or 40 points.
Right.
And that doesn't help matters much, because that's what led to the rule. But it also is why these teams have 1 or 2 good years and then have 2 or 3 bad years, because now their players that are starting the next couple of years have never had any experience, So that's where it should be attacked. I know it's hard to police that, but I think that's part of the problem,
Yeah, for sure. I agree.
Another exciting feature that we'll be unveiling on our Main Street TV local sports break is the question of the week. Each week, we'll be choosing one question submitted by you, our viewers, to ask Coach Hunt. To submit your questions, subscribe to Main Street TV on YouTube and comment on this or any other of our local sports break videos, or follow us on Facebook or Instagram and comment on any of our local sports break posts. Then tune in each week, Thursdays at 7 p.m. on our Main Street TV YouTube channel to catch the new episode and maybe hear your question asked on the air. All right, let's talk a little bit about your players this week. Let's go about it a different way. Let's talk about position groups, okay? Let's talk about your offensive backs. I know that was something, obviously, that you were interested in with the injury last week to Gage. Tell me about your running backs and how you felt they performed Friday night.
Yeah, so Price Davis stepped in for Gage, kind of carrying the load, and did a fantastic job. He's a great running back, has a lot of talent. He's good enough to play. It was really hard to take Gage off the field, when he's healthy.
Sure.
But Price is a good player, and he played in some big moments last year as a sophomore when Noah Vaughn went down. Gage was the guy, but Price played some running back. So he was starting at slot receiver, but still we were doing some jet stuff with him and having him running some routes and some quick game. He's so good with the ball in his hands, but obviously now he's a full-time back. We also moved, Ori Vananda to kind of be one of his backups, and Cam Porter, both of them sophomores. And then we got Royal Curtis, who starts at corner, that can play some running back as well. So those are kind of the 4 guys, Price being the leader in the clubhouse for sure, that we will rely on, without Gage. Couldn't have been happier with how they played, though, Friday. I thought even the young guys played well.
Your offensive line, I watched some of the clips from Friday night. I thought your offensive line, for the most part, did a really good job coming off the football and did a really good job staying with their blocks. Would you agree with that?
Yeah. We've got good size there, and that's an advantage for sure, because you never know what you're going to get in high school football.
Right.
We've played a lot of undersized football games for sure at Maryville, and this year we've actually got some pretty good size on the line, and I thought they fired off the ball well. I think we took advantage of the fatigue of the D-line Friday night. There'll be a lot of games that we play in the future where teams aren't playing guys both ways, and so fatigue won't be as big a factor. We're just going to have better technique, fundamentals, and execution. in order to create running lanes.
How about your quarterback play? I know you're still playing your two quarterbacks. Overall, generally happy with the way they performed Friday night?
Yep. I think Casey Cobble ran for 95 yards and, threw a touchdown pass to Charlie Manu. I'm sure he felt good about that. Graham played 2 or 3 series, I think, Graham Coulter. Mm-hmm. I think he had a couple balls he'd like to have back, but I'm really satisfied with both of those guys. They're 2 great kids. I think I told you that before, Ralph, and just I'm very fortunate to get to coach both of them. Great high character. They both are great teammates. They care about each other and they care about performing at a high level. And so, I think I feel good about where we're at, and I believe we can win football games with either one of them.
Let's move over to the defensive side of the ball. You've already mentioned, a couple fumble recoveries, couple interception return for a touchdown, which I thought was a really heads up play by the young man who made the catch and took it in the end zone.
Yep.
Talk a little bit about your defense. I know they looked pretty good coming off the ball. They looked pretty good with their assignments. I thought they did a really good job with the quick game, those quick passes out to the side to the wide receivers. I thought your corners and safeties or whoever you had out there did a really good job. So overall, pleased with the defense, right?
Yeah, yes. They played really sound, made Central make plays.
Right.
We didn't give them any easies.
Right.
They didn't get behind us, which was huge. It's going to be another big thing this week.
Right.
And then also tackling in space.
Right.
Because Central had 2 or 3 guys at receiver that were really talented. Now Bradley's got 4 or 5 guys that are even more talented, and they're gonna test our abilities to block, get off blocks in space, and then also tackle in space, running to the football, that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. They've got one of the best players in the state, Boo Carter, and he's committed to Tennessee, and he's made it look easy the first 2 games. So we'll be challenged there. But we're rotating 6 guys on the D line. So far that has worked out really well. Still trying to figure out at linebacker, minus Gage, who's going to be that third guy.
Right.
But Matthew Covert, Hunter Olivet Matthew's a junior and Hunter's a senior, are 2 kids that have really played well the first 2 games and kind of showed that I think they belong. And so really excited for them. And so, it's going to be a great challenge this week, and hopefully we can continue to play better.
Okay, that's a good segue into this week. 3rd game of the season, I guess. First region game, correct?
Yep.
Bradley Central on the road, which is always a challenge anytime you play a really good football team at their place. You've mentioned a little bit about some of their strengths. Yep. What are some of the other things that you guys need to do really well this coming Friday night to be able to come away with a win?
Well, we're going to have to be able to convert passing 3rd downs, I believe.
Right.
Because they do so many things on defense. Coach Floyd, he's been there a while, and we're good friends. He does a great job, but he'll do some things that make it tough on you, and they'll make you look bad at times. And so I think it's going to be important for us to convert, 3rd and 7s, 3rd and 8s during the game to keep a drive going. Obviously as an offensive play caller, you don't ever want to see those, but that's part of football,
right?
And if you're not prepared for that, you're not doing probably your job. So
right.
I think key for us is be able to convert some 3rd downs in the pass game, which I feel really good about. Casey's gotten better and better and better at throwing the ball, and Graham kind of learning what we're doing offensively, feels more and more comfortable, I believe. So that's going to be a key on the offensive side of the ball. The defensive side, is like I said, the biggest thing is tackling their athletes in space. Our quarterback, he has put the ball very accurately down the field so far in the first 2 games. I mean, very impressive thrower, and he's a great athlete. He moved in from Ray County this season and was Ray County's best player last year. And He can run it. He can throw it. Very special. They got the kid that transferred in, Boo Carter, who's, I think, one of the best players in the state of Tennessee. He is electric, plays both sides of the ball, super aggressive on defense as well. Phenomenal football player. Then they've got another safety who's been there, Tennessee commit, as well. So besides those two receiver DB types, they've got two or three other receivers that also play defensive back. They all kind of rotate that are just as equally impressive. I mean, it is a great group of skill kids. And, I told Coach Floyd, I'm excited for him. He's had some really good football teams in the past. I don't know that he's had one quite this good. And, I think that they feel confident and feel good about where they're at, as they should.
Right.
And I would expect it to be a great test.
Yeah, it's going to be a tough game, obviously. And you talked about converting, passes on third and long or third and medium. Obviously, you've got your tight end. You can use him, and I know you haven't had to use him a lot in the first two games. And you got your running back, so you can use them out of the backfield as well. So, are those all things that you look at? When you look at the tape and you say, okay, what do we have to do? How do you go about analyzing? What your plan of attack might be in the passing game?
Yeah, well, and we always want to stay super balanced. We don't ever want to be a one-man show or one-dimensional. And, they know they're going to throw it to this guy every third down, stuff like that. And so, fortunately, we've had good enough players in the past to be able to do that, to be balanced and spread the ball around. So that way they can't just rotate a coverage or, double team certain guys. Using a tight end and a running back in the pass game is something that we've always loved to do. It kind of goes back to the Aaron Douglas days.
Right.
The first time we really started throwing to the tight end, since I've been around Maryville. So, and that's not gone away since. Anytime we've had a tight end body, we've been able to use them. So, but I feel like we're pretty good at receiver right now, honestly. And we've had Britton Barrett ran two fantastic routes last week. We just didn't convert them, and then Charlie Manu has taken a kickoff back first week and then scored on a 40, 50-yard touchdown pass last week. He's got some speed, so we've got some options that I feel really good about. And Price Davis catches it really well out of the backfield as well. Played some receiver earlier in the year. So, third down, I feel good about the fact that they're going to have to cover all of our options. And then we also got the threat of a quarterback run as well if things don't go well. So.
All right, let's finish up by kind of a little question for our fans to kind of get a little insight. Obviously on a Friday night after the game, you address the team and then they go about their business and enjoy the night. And what is as a coach, what does your weekend look like? I mean, how much time are you spending on Saturday looking at film? Or I know that's going to change based on whoever you're playing and the challenges that they present. Yeah. But when do you guys get ready? Because obviously today's Monday, you got to be ready to come to practice with what you know. So what does your Saturday look like, or Sunday, when you're sitting down there breaking down those films?
Yep. So usually for home games, I'll watch the game that night.
Okay, Friday night,
or at least start it. Yeah, because you get home a little earlier. I mean, that's relative.
Right.
It's still 11 o'clock, but then you would if you were on the road.
Sure.
And so sometimes I can get some of the games started that night before I end up succumbing to sleep.
Right.
But on the road, or if I don't get much watched, I like to get up early still. And if we don't get to bed, probably after midnight's when you get to bed on a Friday night. Of a coach, that's just the life you live.
Right.
I like to get up early before all my kids get up.
Right.
8, 5, and 3-year-old, and I'll watch the tape at home. I'll finish our game, and then I'll start the next team and try to watch a couple of their games and take notes. And really, it's more of a generic. Let's get a feel for what they're doing and who their best players are. It's not so much scheme. I will take some notes on things I think that, we might be able to do.
Right.
And then once my kids get up, I do not go back to it.
Okay.
Unless they're in bed early, which is rare on a Saturday night.
Right.
So I leave it alone and try to enjoy the Saturday and do things with the family, or if we've got errands to run. And then Sunday morning, our staff meets very early, about 6:30 in the morning, and we try to do a lot that we can do before a lot of us go to church. And then defensively, a lot of times they'll come back. Defensive side will come back that evening to kind of finish up, and offensively, we'll be able to get most of it done that Sunday morning, collaborating as a staff. And that's the thing about our staff, Ralph, and you know this better than anybody, is just so many great coaches that we really do a good job working together. It's not a one-man show in there saying, here's how we're going to do it and here's how we're going to block it. And there's a lot of guys with great ideas, and we're piecing that together as best we can to figure out how we can be successful.
Yeah, it sounds like it's obviously the football season runs rather quickly when you're doing all that kind of stuff. And I'm assuming all you coaches probably watch the film individually, and then when you get together, you kind of trade out your ideas, right?
That's the plan. And of course, we'll watch some games together.
Right.
But, we've got a few hours, so it doesn't take as much time. And, with technology nowadays, it's not the VHS or even the DVD, where
right.
You're rewinding and you can sort it to just defense of the other team. You don't have to watch anything you don't want to watch. It's crazy. So it's super efficient. We can
Yes, it is. Yeah.
Click a button and pull up any formation. We can watch it by formation. It's unbelievable what you can do nowadays versus even 10, 15 years ago.
Oh yeah. Yeah. And that actually in a way makes it even more challenging, because now you start thinking, well, maybe I need to watch a little bit more, where when you had to load the 8mm film up, you figured, I'm not going to do this, all day long. So
that's right. Yeah, that's right. You feel
Derek,
guilty.
we appreciate your time. Congratulations. You guys are 2-0. As I said, stack those W's. Big game coming up this coming Friday night.
Yeah.
We'll reconnect with you next week, talk about the Bradley Central game, and of course, look ahead to the West game. So good luck this week. Have a good one and be safe.
Thank you so much, Ralph.
All right. Take care. Welcome back to the Main Street TV Local Sports Break. Hi, I'm your host, Ralph Miranda. Hope you enjoyed this week's episode with Coach Derek Hunt. The Rebels off to a 2-0 start, a big victory last Friday night at home against the Knoxville Central Bobcats, 52-6. Great performance across the football, across both sides of the football by Maryville. Their offense putting up a lot of points, their defense with some key turnovers and return an interception for a touchdown as the Rebels go to 2-0 and win their first game at home this season. But it does get tougher as we go forward. And the first one is this coming Friday night against Bradley Central. We'll talk to Coach Hunt about that game. Bradley Central poses lots of challenges for Maryville, lots of athletes, Tennessee commit on their side of the football. So it's going to be a tough game for Maryville as they go on the road. Of course, we'll talk, as we always do, about some of the key performers for Maryville last Friday night on both sides of the football. All in all, a very good show, and we enjoy talking to Coach Hunt each and every week. So make sure you stay with us next week as we rejoin Coach Hunt to wrap up the Bradley Central game and, of course, look ahead to the big contest against Knoxville West. For Nathan Miranda, this is Ralph Miranda. Thank you for joining us on the Main Street TV Local Sports Break. We'll see you next week.